sorry, 2.5% to be included in the second or third year.
If you don't do 17% this year and you do 14.25, it changes what you would need to do in the subsequent years. And I want to see what that, he put those numbers up there, but we don't have that in this. So I would like that sheet so I know what that looks like.
So adding in the 2 point,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you.
If you're done, we'll take public testimony and then we'll move on. I see you, Pat.
This question for
Let them get their equipment out of the way and then
Real quick.
we don't want you throwing any of their equipment at the president.
Actually, considering the amount of computer equipment I own, I probably would end up donating.
Sign up sheet, no one signed up to testify, but since we finished this, somebody may have a burning desire to tell us what they think. And being Pat, the other Pat.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. My name is Pat Russell, and I reside at 15989 Southeast Bilquist Circle, Milwaukee. I just had an opportunity to review the slides here this morning, and I'm a little bit concerned that there's no report. In other words, we're looking at summary analysis, we're not looking at a report. And I would hope that the board does get a report of this information. And I have a lot of different questions in my mind, but they're more of a, to me, an engineering type question that would be asked of a report. But my concerns kind of go toward the benchmarking study. And I think it's one thing to project out, say, 5 years to see where we're at financially, and I think that exercise is a good one. I don't have any problem with a lot of its projections. It's interesting to see how some agencies pay as you go, others have indebted themselves, and we're kind of sort of in the middle. I was a little bit concerned that the comparisons were only to agencies within our region as opposed to maybe some West Coast agencies that are seeing the impacts of, let's call it, for no other reason, just global warming. And I'm thinking of like Northern California as an example of cities and districts facing water shortages. And I think this is a very real issue that we will foresee. May not be 5 years from now, but we should be planning 50 to 100 years horizon. And I don't know what the board's intent was on the benchmark study. I would go after the study a little differently. I would go after a 50 to 100 year study, spend some money on that, and take a look at our system, what it is today, and what we really need 50 to 100 years from now based on certain assumptions, whatever those growth assumptions may be. My suspicions are that our rural area facilities, which is basically the South, probably would require major improvements if we had fairly good design assumptions for a higher level of service. And I think those kinds of variables have a major impact on policy. And I also agree with Chair Sawa that I think that our wholesale rates probably are too cheap. We are paying a lot of money to clean that water that we get, surface water runoff upstream. We're paying for that treatment that we're passing on a real bargain to agencies that don't have to go through that treatment. I'm very concerned about Lake Oswego trying to grab water resources and including a new city who's never used this basin before, the size of literally Beaverton. And right on the cusp, in the next 20 years, we have a new city that was to be, I don't know if it will be, but Damascus was to be the size of Beaverton. And my question is, where is all this water coming from that we're going to serve this type of growth? So, to me, that's an important study that we should be looking at, because you might come to the conclusion that rates for our customers are pretty good, but if we have surplus water that we're treating, maybe we're doling it out too cheaply. So, again, I don't know if this benchmark study focus was really to go long term. I'd be more interested in hearing what our engineer has to say in terms of more long-term planning. And I think we should talk about that before you raise rates, just in terms of context of your fiscal policy. Thank you.
Cindy?
Ms. Holloway was going to know.
Pat? The other Pat?
Pat H. and Pat Long. Patricia Holloway is here. I do have a question relative to your study. You talked about operations staff and being roughly in balance. Did you look at the size of management and other staff?
Go ahead. Come forward so we get paid.
So our measures of staff levels, we looked at it two different ways. We broke it down specifically for O&M staff, and then we looked at total staff in one of those metrics. We didn't specifically break down and look at metrics for each individual type of staff, so administrative staff, customer service staff, but looked more on a total staff basis initially to make sure that if we were in line with total staff and we were in line with O&M staff, then the assumption was that generally speaking, we'd be in line with those other categories as well, based on the fact that total was appropriate and then the O&M staff was appropriate.
But the figures that you've given us are based on O&M staff, at least according to your report.
Yeah, so of the, the graphs may have been misleading, so I'll clarify that. So we actually had customer counts on the basis of total staff, because all of the staff working at the district were involved in serving those customer accounts in some way. We looked at miles of water main per O&M staff, and so we acknowledged that miles of main is directly related to the number of O&M staff it takes to maintain it. And then we again looked at operational facilities as a function of total staff as well. So two of the three were on a total staff basis.
Okay, thank you very much. And it's of course very difficult to do any kind of evaluation without knowing what goes in. It's like sausage. And we don't have any of that information. I did hear a lot of focus on retail customers. I agree with Pat Russell that I think that our perhaps our wholesale rates are far too low, and we do need to be looking at that. There's a realistic question with all of the delay going on with Lake Oswego and Tigard. There's no result that I know of yet, no opinion from the appellate court on the water rights extensions that are currently before it. West Lynn is certainly raising a lot of fuss. I'm not sure that CRW is not going to be positioned to sell water to other people going forward, and so I think we really should be thinking about that. And I also think I didn't see any information here that suggested in any way that expenses could be reduced. And I didn't see any information that gave us varying scenarios based on the fact that as rates go up, historically, consumption goes down. And I know, I usually was at a minimum rate, and in the summer I pay $250 to water my lawn, and this year I won't be doing that. So, I think I would recommend to the board that it consider the impact of the diminishing consumption. I'm certainly not in favor of loading up the base rate, but I think in terms of figuring out where you're going and how much money you're going to actually be bringing in relative to your expense level, that you should be considering that, and you should be seriously considering trying to cut expense.
Thank you. Cindy?
Cindy Lewis Wolfram, in Milwaukee, ratepayer. I just wanted to thank the board for bringing this presentation to us, the public, so that we can get a chance to get involved with this process prior to your changing any further rates, either past this fiscal year or in the future years. For us to at least have a basis of where to go from in forming questions to ask the board, it was a very good presentation for us to have. One of the things that came out of this presentation, though, is the fact that we started off fairly decently with the forward motion that the board took last year in approving the rate changes that they did and bolstering the base rate as requested by the Citizens Rate Committee. And in looking forward, even though it wasn't as much as the rate committee had made a recommendation on, at least looking forward to this year and increasing the rate by another 14.25%. I think that not think, but I know I agree with Ms. Holloway that every year we need to look at where costs can be kept. And I think that our staff here has made an excellent effort every year to find places that we can cut our expenses. But I want to remind the chair and commissioners that there have been things that haven't been updated, upgraded, and moved through that O&M system over the last 4.5, 5 years that they have either been delayed or decided against at this time because of the way that the economy has been overall and the willingness of previous boards to not put that strain on our ratepayers' personal economy. But as Mr. Humbertson suggested tonight, the numbers that the percentages reveal are smaller than most people will be experiencing in the increases in their grocery bills over the next few years. The actual dollars out of our pockets will be smaller than increases in our grocery bill. And I think that this is a much more necessary item than food to some of us. And I would really be more willing to pay a little more on my water bill to make sure that it got to my home in a safe, clean manner than I would be to be happy about prices going up on beef. So I do appreciate your efforts to keep us in a sound fiscal situation, and appreciate especially the public has the information of how it's going to happen or how it may happen over the course of the next 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is an action item.
Mr. Chairman, I move to authorize the general manager to negotiate a 2-year contract extension with Moss Adam LLP for audit services.
Second.
Any comment?
Yes, I do have one comment.
Yes.
In looking at the history of the district, I noted that since 1996, the district has had clean audits, regardless of who the auditing firms have been, and there have been a number of them. So I think that concerns about some aspect of our finances were unwarranted and unfounded, and that kind of a track record of auditing demonstrates that.
Thank you. Any public comment? Pat?
Commissioner Holloway, right here. I would just point out for Commissioner Humberston's edification that the year we had a $70,000, or the several years, where we accumulated a $70,000 embezzlement, we also had clean audits. And an audit, as I would expect you would know, only says that the financial information is accurately represented. It does not say that there are no underlying problems.
Thank you. We want to have a vote. All those in favor of the action item number 4, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 3.
Commissioner Sterling? Commissioner Sterling?
Do you have an alarm clock?
The alarm clock's still
He's objecting to your comment. Consent agenda. Carol?
Because the consent agenda is a consent agenda, it just includes the gross payroll and accounts paid.
Move to approve the consent agenda. Second.
You finished with your?
Yeah, I have a presentation for the consent agenda.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Now you're up for informational reports.
Yes, thank you. Carol Bright, Chief Financial Officer. I've got the financial reports, agenda item 5 for you this evening. Again, we'll start with the accounts receivable aging. The April 30th billing is the aging right after bills have been presented, so you can see that we have a rather large total in the 0-30 column. The ending balance is pretty close to where we were at the end of February, so our consumption was about the same for these 2 billing cycles. But overall, our consumption this year has been a little bit higher than the prior year, and for the April billing, our consumption was 8,000 CCFs greater than we billed a year ago. So we're seeing some benefit from the rate increase. We're also selling a little bit more water this year than we did last year.
So the trend is upward.
And I think it's weather-based. I don't really think people's habits have changed. You know, I wouldn't say that at this time. I think it's simply weather-based. For the cash and investment position, at the end of April, we've got $8,313,000 in the bank, both the local government investment pool as well as the general checking account. A little bit more than that, we have not, at this point, have not posted the interest earnings to the local government investment pool. Again, this month I've included a slide kind of showing our cash trends, and as you can see, every other month we drop pretty significantly because we only bill every other month, but still the overall trend for the year is upward. So looking at our revenue, comparing over the last 5 years where our revenues are for the first 9 months of the year, over 5 years, you can see that our revenues are higher than they have been, and that is due to the rate increase as well as to the additional consumption from our ratepayers. We also have a comparison over the same 9 months for 5 years worth of expenditures. And if the board recalls, the fiscal 2013 budget was reduced by about $800,000, and you can see that to date we're tracking lower than we were for the prior year. This chart shows the comparison from year over year. Our revenue, total revenue is 832,000 higher than it was at this time last year. Our water sales are 795,000 higher. And you can see that all of our expenditure categories in the general fund are tracking lower than they were the prior year.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, apparently there's some problem with Mr. Sterling that I'm not unaware of.
Yeah, he said that he tried to vote and couldn't, he said everything cut off, and he was having a great deal of trouble hearing. The volume was not loud enough going through the phone. So he'd appreciate it if you would call him back.
Tom, could you read it?
Do we have that accomplished?
He said the sound was very, very low.
Good day, and thank you for voting Grafton Sterling.
Apparently he's not available, so. Apparently we got his voice message.
Does he have another phone number?
That's the one, he gave me the 314 number to call him tonight. That's the one I found.
I don't know if he's trying to call in or what. I know, I remember I had terrible trouble with the phone bridge as well. Let me see if there's another number. Try, try 888-701-4527, or try his mobile number again.
One more time.
888-701-4527. But I would try his cell again.
Yeah, Grafton Sterling.
Commissioner Sterling, this is Adora Campbell. Can you hear me?
Yeah, if you want to try it again, look it up and then it just dropped off.
Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. So you're connected to the meeting. It's 7:16, and we're talking about the financial report.
Okay, I have no questions or comments at this point.
Okay.
Grafton, how do you vote on the action item to approve Moss contract with Moss Adams?
Commissioner Sterling, can you hear me? Might be on his end.
I can hear you now, but you're broken. I think I'm going to have to discontinue the reception. It's just not that good. It's be too much of a conflict.
Thank you. Go ahead with your report. Carol?
As the financial statements through the end of March takes us 3/4 of the way through the budget year, I'm providing a little bit of additional detail here for where we are in the budget. If you look at personnel services, we are at 68.9%. 3/4 of the way through, 75%, so we're a little under on personnel services right now. We have had a couple of vacancies in the finance and accounting department that have recently been filled, but we actually saved some money from having those open a little bit longer than I would have liked. Benefits and taxes are a little bit closer to the 75%, but still under. And when you look at the benefits and taxes, there's a couple of things to pay attention to. All of the workers' comp has been paid for the year. We may get a slight adjustment bill at the end of the year. And we've only paid 2 of the 4 quarters for TriMet taxes. When you look at the materials and services portion of the general fund budget, we're at 64.4%. And within the customer services area, every item is below 75%. Customer statement processing, though, we still have 2 billing cycles left to go. At the end of March, we haven't done the April or the June billing. Facilities and security is at 53.3. The assessment and taxes portion is complete. And emergency preparedness is a little bit less, I think, than where you would expect to be, but we are in the midst of working on the COOP plan, and our consultant will be back and reviewing the progress that staff has made as a whole to kind of give us next steps, and much of that should happen before the end of the year. General administration is a little bit high, it's at 76.7, and that is based on a couple of things. Our dues and memberships, the Regional Water Consortium dues was higher than budgeted this year. Apparently, a couple of members dropped out of the organization, so the cost had to be split amongst fewer members, and we did not have that information when we prepared the budget last year. And additionally, as we all know, the insurance rates are higher, so even when we did the transfer, I knew that we had some savings in some other areas, and so that's, the insurance is going to be higher than the budget for this year. If we look at the materials category, we're at 55.5%, but we haven't posted all of the inventory that's been used. That kind of gets posted after the fact, so as we post additional inventory usage, that number will go up. In the office category, postage is less than 75%, but again, we've got 2 more billing cycles to mail. We have discovered that we'll have some savings on printing this year. The water quality report that's typically mailed as an insert with all of the customer bills can be posted on the website, and we just put a note on the April bill that tells people where they can go. We will print some copies. We need to have copies available for customers that come in. Other support cost is fairly low, and a big portion of that is the training budget. We're pretty low on training right now, but we found, every year this happens, most of our staff training, the short school for the waterworks operators, the AWWA conference, which is going on currently, and the Government Finance Officers Association conference, those are all in the last quarter. In our professional and contracted services, we're at 59%. The audit portion is at 99.5%. All the other accounts are below 75%. Equipment, again, below 75%. We are a little high on equipment maintenance, but the other accounts are tracking a little bit low. Utilities, we're at 69%. We will likely use a little bit more as we move forward, because with warm weather and perhaps producing more water, we will be using more electricity. So this is not an expenditure that tracks evenly across the way. And water purchases and treatment. For water purchases, we're already at 73%, and we still have 4 months of purchases from South Fork to be posted. And the watershed management is already at 97%, but we have paid the Clackamas River water providers dues in full. When we move on to the capital outlay appropriation category, it's very low. But these are the large dollar purchases, so the percentage can move up quickly with just a couple of transactions. And in fact, if you look at general equipment and tools, we just purchased the filter coal for the water treatment plant, and that came in a little bit over budget, so that general equipment and tools is going to be 103%. Most of the others, though, are going to track okay. We've been monitoring it closely. We had talked earlier about some pump replacements that needed to happen that were not specifically anticipated in this budget. And so those things are going to happen and will still stay within our budget appropriation for capital outlay. That's the end of my presentation, but I would be happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
I have
Go ahead, Ken.
I have none.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Manager report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We changed the format around a little bit this year in the report, hopefully to make it a little bit more readable. The GM activity report is we attended a special session put on by SDAO on legislative matters. And this is dated already because at the time there had been 250 bills that had reached the governor. Out of 2,500 that had been submitted, that number is substantially higher now. But at the time we went to the conference, that's where the numbers were. It's estimated that of the 2,500, probably a third of those will become law. The legislator, both the Democrats and the House and the Senate leadership had guesstimated, as you know, constitutionally they have to be over by July 13th. They're guesstimating that they'll be done by the 22nd, although, as you know, with legislative matters, it's anybody's guess what the actual date will be. The bigger issues, as most people know, during this session is money, or lack thereof, and the big one is PERS. The Democratic proposal essentially eliminates COLAs and tax breaks, or reduces COLAs. I don't think it eliminates it totally, what they actually voted on. And that also would place limits on non-residents who live out of state who are PERS recipients. They would have to begin paying taxes on their proceeds. The Republican Party, on the other hand, is advocating for a hard cap on the 8% rate of return, a hard cap on the 6%, and it would disallow spiking. For those of you who are not used to that term, it's essentially allowing public employees to take all of unused accrued sick and vacation time and apply that to their, typically it's the last year's earnings, although the calculation is on the 2 highest years of earnings, which then allows their retirement, monthly retirement, to be increased accordingly. House Bill 2617, I think that one's of interest for especially those who have rural, they reside in rural districts, because it will require that with island annexations that are greater than 100 acres would have to go to a vote of the people. I don't know what the status of that is thus far, but that was one of the bills that seemed to be moving forward. And House Bill 2618 addresses territorial withdrawals, requiring cities, if they're going to annex land in the unincorporated area and also services, that they have to demonstrate that they are in fact a service provider. That would probably come into play if this passes. As you know, there is some discussion going on now. I had reported at the last meeting that Happy Valley and Milwaukee were in agreement as to where their urban growth boundaries would reside, actually essentially having I-205 as a dividing line. And we just found out late last week, that I believe it's Gladstone has moved forward and has laid claim to our industrial area, which had already been between Milwaukee and Happy Valley, allocated to Happy Valley. There's a 1987 agreement apparently between the three entities where they had agreed on what the boundaries would be. And if you looked at that mapping, our area, because that's where our treatment plant resides, was not included in that discussion. The other thing that we have found out is that in 2005, Happy Valley sent a formal notice to Milwaukee and Gladstone withdrawing from that agreement. So it will be interesting to see how that discussion plays itself out, particularly if this particular legislation passes, because currently Gladstone doesn't service our unincorporated area. So that'll be an interesting exercise to see what's going on. And as you know, the other issue is, even though we're not an authority for cities to come in and annex an area where there are main transportation arterials, and in this case, a treatment plant, the ratepayers of CRW would have to be reimbursed. And that bill would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 to $60 million that they would have to come up with in order to make that happen. So we're keeping an eye on that. That's something that I think is of interest to us. And then the other item that affects water districts that is also supported by the Oregon Water Utilities Commission is Senate Bill 217, that essentially says that anyone with water rights will have to pay a $100 annual fee to a Water Resources Department. And this is really a revenue recovery provision where we're essentially eliminating the general fund contribution. And it is probably more analogous to the camel's nose under the tent because it would essentially set a precedent for probably raising that $100 to a larger amount in the future. At least that's been my experience once that practice gets started. The other thing that we were involved in is meeting with Happy Valley. As you know, we reported on that at the last meeting. We met with the city manager, Jason Tuck, and their city planner, Michael Walter, along with Chris Crean, who's the city attorney. Representatives from Sunrise, that was Mr. Hathorn and Mr. Plant, attended as well, and essentially talked to them about, we were talking about a three-way agreement that essentially confirms that Happy Valley would continue servicing the customers that reside within Happy Valley's district. CRW would continue to service customers within CRW's area, and that we would essentially have a trifurcated agreement. Happy Valley, and we asked them to bear the expense of drafting up the agreement, because we were essentially had an agreement where we were pretty much in agreement. They did make a last minute proposal, I would say, that we, rather than have one master agreement, that we break the agreement up into threes, that there would be an agreement between Happy Valley and Sunrise, there would be an agreement between Happy Valley, CRW, and then yet another agreement between CRW and Sunrise. We didn't quite know what the benefit of that was, and we're still not sure what the benefit of that is, other than costing everybody more money to draft agreements. We then received a draft of that proposal. There's two things that staff finds to be troubling. One is that they want to negotiate with CRW first, and then they would go and negotiate with Sunrise. We communicated back to them, no cigar, that we would do this in concert. The other one that was troubling is they also wanted to collect our SDCs for us and charge us a 5% administrative fee. Of course, that's, in my opinion, a non-starter. And we told them so, that we had no need for them to, and saw no benefit to anybody other than them raising more revenue for us to allow that to happen. I also went to, attended the Future Water Supply, their second annual conference that was put on by Tonkin Thorpe LLP and Webb Bush Securities. This is really held for water providers within the Pacific Northwest, and it was essentially to provide an overview of water quality and governance issues that would affect various water providers within the Pacific Northwest. So there was attendance from people in the state of Washington as well as Oregon and parts of Idaho. We've continued working on the well number 1 for CRW. We held a meeting here with all of the general managers in the Clackamas River Basin. We did have a last-minute cancellation by the city of Lake Oswego, but the meeting was well attended. All the parties invited attended. As I said, we invited in consultants GSI and Black and Beach to talk about the well quality and the groundwater permits. It was agreed by all that one of the problems that we have in the Clackamas River Basin is that we don't have an alternative or emergency water source. That if anything were to happen to the Clackamas River, we would be in pretty deep trouble. And so one of the things we talked about is the need to continue meeting and to get together and talk about jointly maybe paying for or developing an alternative source. You know that in CRW we have a couple of potential areas where we could do that. The intertie with Portland that's coming from Powell Butte that is being built. The city has asked us on several occasions if we would be interested in that type of intertie. We also know that by doing that would also allow Sunrise to tie in to CRW's source. And I think Oak Lodge and some discussions about that, we could all benefit from that. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Essentially, we're paying the same consultants to issue the same reports, and all of us paying for it separately, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And so that's one of the things that we'd like to pursue more. So it was a productive meeting. The other thing that we're looking at is our contracts, because we now have a new insurance carrier, and it's going to require, I think Ms. Bright we're going to talk about that tonight, or maybe at some future meeting, about us needing to develop a risk pool because we're no longer covered by SDAO, and we're basically dealing with an insurance company really in the private market. So we need to be doing that because our deductibles are a little bit higher in terms of, you probably like with your automobile, just because you have a no deductible doesn't mean that you want to go out and file claims. And so to have some monies to pay for minor events that might occur is probably a good way to go. We were even doing that to a lesser extent when we were under SDAO in order to keep our experience rates low. And so, budget development, as you know, we went through, I believe the chair's already announced that Mr. Russell was elected the chair of the budget committee. Mr. Kerr was elected vice chair. The meeting for the 2nd of May was canceled. Our next scheduled meeting is May 25th. And we had the presentation today by FCS. And the other thing, that there was a small meeting with Commissioner Hummerston and Kalani, along with representatives from Sunrise Water, to just give a status report on the ORS 190. So that represents kind of my comments about activities. Just for the board's edification, there was a request that we provide copies of the BCT settlement agreements once they were finalized. Those were part of your packet. There is essentially a three-parter: the settlement agreement, the easement agreements, and the termination agreements are all in there. The other document that's in your packet is a copy of the order dismissing the petitioner's request for a declaratory judgment, where the court did in fact rule that the the county and myself had standing, and dismissing the other cases. And so that's a part of the packet. And the last thing that you had, I believe, Commissioner Sterling had asked for a copy of the Phillips Law invoice. That is a part of this particular packet that you have. I would note that year-to-date, as of March, our total legal billings were $111,437, of which $54,000 represents Phillips Law's direct payment. The rest was for the litigation that the board is aware of. So that's my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Go on with commission business. Is it?
Would you allow a question on, or comment on what he just said?
Pardon?
Pardon?
What did you say?
Would you allow a comment on what Mr. Moore just said? Or a question?
Come on up.
I have a question about this Gladstone interest in the industrial area per the 1987 Urban Services Agreement. You said that they announced that they're pretty much going to lay claim to the industrial area. Just recently?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Gladstone notified Happy Valley and Milwaukee. The full discussion is that when Happy Valley and Milwaukee met to, and as you know, that was a mediated agreement, but the mediator provided by the county. They had invited Gladstone into that discussion, and they refused to participate. Once the agreement came to a conclusion, Gladstone last Thursday notified the parties that they didn't agree with the outcome and that they were laying claim to our industrial area.
Okay, my question is, how would an IGA now between CRW and Happy Valley affect that? I mean, is it wise to go ahead with something like that?
Well, we haven't done anything at this point specific to your question. It's kind of put a break on everything. What we have been told is that the agreement between Happy Valley and Milwaukee has standing because Happy Valley essentially withdrew from the 1987 agreement in 2005, and given the opportunity to participate in the discussions between Happy Valley and Milwaukee, Gladstone refused. And so therefore, the thinking is that it's hard for them to come back now and inject themselves. Also with the provision that we were talking about, where currently Gladstone is not the service provider in CRW's service area. So you have to demonstrate, as I understand it by statute, that first of all, you're a service provider within the service area that you're attempting to annex. Now, what does all that mean? I have no idea. So those are merely the issues that are out there.
Thank you.
Just a clarification, if Mr. Moore wouldn't mind, the next meeting of the Budget Committee is on the 16th? The 16th, correct?
Yeah.
Not the 25th?
what did I say, the 25th or something? Okay, thank you.
It is the 16th? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Chair, so, relative to the potential House Bill 2618, another issue is Milwaukee, because currently Milwaukee is annexing in territory as people are connecting into the Milwaukee sewer service. Those customers are currently Clackamas River water customers. And so I can see that we potentially have an issue that's going to need to be resolved in the very near future there. And so my question would be, if this bill passes, since CRW is providing the water there now, Milwaukee is not. Is Milwaukee in fact going to be able to annex in those 250 or some households that we're talking about in the present time?
Okay.
I don't have all of the information, Ms. Holloway. What I know up to this point is what Milwaukee did was annex the streets. And they also left it up to the various citizens to voluntarily allow themselves to be annexed for purposes of sewer. We are in the process, as you know, discussing with Milwaukee, revising the IGA that we have with them. And we purposely waited when we heard that Milwaukee was talking with Happy Valley for them to get those issues resolved. And now that they are, we have returned to the table to have those discussions, because there's really more than just that. It's the issue about billing, you know, because when you were on the board, the issue was if somebody didn't pay their bills and they wanted the water turned off, is it CRW that's turning off the service, or is it Milwaukee that's turning off the service? And given that we're providing the water, and somebody were to send a what's called a directed payment that says, I want to pay my water bill, but I don't want to pay my sewer, what do you do? And that's an issue that hasn't been resolved, and that's something that needs to be resolved. Those are some of the elements that will need to be worked out before any agreement is consummated.
And I would suggest, Chair Soa, that there's an implication here relative to boundary protection. It sounds like this bill is, in a manner of speaking, is almost a backdoor boundary protection. And so as Commissioner Humberston and Commissioner Kalani continue their discussions with Mr. Moore with Sunrise Water Authority, the supposed benefit to CRW is boundary protection. And if that's being voted, I would certainly suggest as a CRW ratepayer that we look to convert that into a little bit of cash. Thank you.
We're now with commission business, number 7. Ken, you want to give us an update on what happened to the one applicant we had?
Yes, we did have one applicant. Unfortunately, it turned out that he lives outside the district. His actual physical boundaries, he had a post office box inside the district, but his residence was outside, so he was informed that he would not be eligible. He's not an elector of the district. We haven't had any other applications at this point in time.
You note that in the packet, it says what we've done to advertise the position being open. And we're waiting now for someone to get interested. The next item is the discussion of the board governance and policies.
Well, this again, there's just a few issues that I think might be needed to be addressed and/or somewhat more effectively addressed as far as our staff is concerned. So I'd like to ask that our management team look at these policies and come back with some recommendations on them. I'm not, certainly not directing that it be any specific kind of language, but the issues that concern me, one is a reimbursement for our attendance at meetings. It's come to my attention that people wait 6 months oftentimes or more before they turn in their reimbursement forms. It seems to me that complicates things for the chief financial officer and her staff, and that we should be putting in our requests for reimbursement for expenses in a timely manner by the end of the month or shortly thereafter, something to that effect, rather than waiting for 6 months and then putting staff through the position of having to research the validity of the requests. I don't know that we have at least I haven't found a policy regarding nepotism with respect to our district, and it might be something we need to look at. Is it appropriate, if you are a board member, that a member of your family be employed or not? And if so, how would you manage that effectively? Obviously, people have a right to run for office, and people have a right to their jobs. So if we had that circumstance, do we have a policy in place to address it? I know where I used to work, my wife also worked in the same place, and we were very careful about how we conducted business so that there was no conflict. But I don't know that we have a policy that addresses it in the district, and maybe we should. Seems strange to me that if you're a member of the board, that you can still run for another position on the board, which is currently occurring. I know that it's currently legal under state law. Is that something that the district has a right to control or not? And if so, how would we control that? And finally, and this is kind of a personal thing to me, congressmen are required to be present to cast a vote in our Congress. Senators are required to be present to cast a vote in our Senate, and are often wheeled in on wheelchairs when they're ill to make sure that they're there to vote. It strikes me that board members of the Clackamas River Water District should be present physically at the meetings, in front of the public, responding to the public, and making their decisions in front of the public. So I'd like us to take a look at that policy. I believe we should be here present. Maybe an exception if you have a family emergency once a year, or a vacation once a year, but not as a routine practice. That's just my opinion, something I think we should look at. I think there was one other item that was of interest to another one of the members, so I'll defer to our treasurer.
I was wondering, in other areas where I've worked, and I was dealing with a lot of money, it required to go through a bonding process. And it seems to me that the commissioners, CRW commissioners, do deal in a lot of money. We don't have a hands-on sort of situation, but we are involved with, we can be involved in large contracts, approving and or disapproving, whatever the case may be. It seems to me that it would be foolish to go to a bonding of the commissioners to make sure that they're qualified to be involved in this sort of thing.
Thank you. Staff will give us a report on those items, and we'll take them up at some future meeting. Anyone on the commission to have a report on an assignment favor?
Well, one of the things I found in trouble with the C4, the commitment meeting with the county and the various special districts, they tend to change their meeting nights and let them get out. And I was up there the other day, at the building there at the Red Soils, trying to get some information about when the next meeting would be held and kind of get a scheduling. And it wasn't on the computer. The receptionist there didn't have any idea, had no idea when the next meeting would be. There was no programming at all in there. So she said to call somebody there at the one of the committee members or staff, county staff. And I talked to our manager, and he got me some information for the next meeting. But it's a week different from what it was when I wasn't attending. So I don't know. It's kind of a strange setup.
Yeah. Okay, we'll wrap up the meeting with, see if anyone in the public has any additional comments. Okay.
My request is actually kind of coincides with Mr. Humbertson's board governance issue, but I will explain it. Thank you. Carol, this is for you. Well, actually, you're the treasurer. I'll give you the signed one.
Here's your name and address for the record and proceed.
Catherine Kehoe, former Commissioner of Clackamas River Water District. My address is 14778 Scarlet Oak Street. So I am submitting a reimbursement for the time I was a commissioner. These vary the month. They vary by month. It has a description by the year and also which meetings were attended. And I've always, prior to this meeting, have always submitted my expense reimbursements the month following. But I believe that you're well aware of the politics that were going on the CRW board during my tenure as a commissioner. And certain commissioners were voting against commissioner reimbursements. So we were having a tied vote of 2 yes, 2 no. And as I could not vote on my own reimbursements, it would fail. So therefore, I just wouldn't submit the reimbursements and ask for approval. Now that there is a change in the board, I'm requesting that the board perhaps suspend the board policy of the reimbursement submittal to the board and to the CFO prior to the upcoming fiscal year. So that's why I'm before you today. I'm not asking for approval for a monetary amount, just for suspension for my reimbursements. I will hand everything in by the end of the month. I believe this is everything except for the 190 meetings that I attended, along with former Commissioner Kemper, with certain members of the Sunrise Board and with the general manager. But I still have to get a record of those meeting times. So I'm not asking for an exact amount, because also the finance department has to check and approve the amounts.
Thank you. As we talk about the new policy, we'll also talk about reimbursing those people from the past, because I believe Commissioner Holloway's hand up, I believe she's submitted a voucher also. Go ahead, Pat.
Thank you, Priscilla. I don't remember the exact point in time, but the, whatever you want to call it, prayer board, changed policies so that board approval of commissioner reimbursement was not required. It simply went through the finance department. So I don't understand what the issue is. But the point I would like to make about it is that I don't know what time period former Commissioner Kehoe is attempting to claim for. However, Clackamas River and Water's own attorney, outside legal counsel, has acknowledged that Commissioner Kehoe was not resident in the district for all the time that she actually usurped a position at the board table. So I would respectfully request that those dates be very carefully reviewed. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no other business, the meeting is adjourned.